Hi everybody, how are you all doing? This is Cindy, which was the true sin. This video is about Letecia Stauch's intention on representing herself at her upcoming trial for the murder of Gannon Stauch. Let's look at her background just a little bit. Probable cause affidavit, February 28th. It was a request for a warrant to arrest Letecia Stauch. The police call it her consciousness of guilt because during the first 24 to 48 hours surrounding the disappearance of a child, it's reasonable that parents or step-parents would actively be involved in the search to recover their child. But in the first 48 hours after Gannon's disappearance, Letecia Stauch rented a car, turned her cell phone off for 4 hours on the night of the 28th. She washed her car immediately prior to going into the police department. She evaded law enforcement attempts to conduct a more in-depth interview and did not participate in the search for Gannon.
You are?
I am Letecia Stauch, which is Gannon's stepmother. Well, I'm not allowed to talk about anything with the case. I would more so be willing to talk about how the community needs to have faith and continue to work together and not make these false accusations, like the things that have been said that I've disappeared from the community. I haven't been there to help, but there's lots of reasons behind that. Right, death threats are one of them. My family's getting lots of death threats. We counted over 20-some death threats already. Two, my husband's ex-wife is living in our home, and of course I'm not coming home to do these things and to help with the family when I was kind of like told I couldn't. And then many other things that happened with the El Paso County Police Department, you know, and in doing the investigation I was told I wasn't complying. And could I elaborate on that?
Please do.
Yes, so I asked for an attorney during the interview, and I was denied that by them. I was held because they were blocking the door, and I was told I couldn't leave, and that if I would have touched them, they would have probably, you know, said I still wasn't complying or said I was, you know, trying to run away or something. But during the interview, I asked several times, could I stop the interview? Could I get an attorney? Could I stop the interview? Could I get an attorney? I was denied. I was told I couldn't get nothing to drink. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I mean, it was continuously that my constitutional rights were violated. That's why they said I wasn't cooperating at that time, correct. Well, I asked for an attorney at the time because there was one individual, there was two really good detectives, and so I'm not, you know, going to talk bad about detectives, but the tactics they started to get when I would answer questions, they try to, you know, they're detectives, they're supposed to twist, the one main goal is to find Gannon. But during that time, some of those things made me feel uncomfortable the way they were saying things, so I immediately stopped and felt like an attorney would help me with some of the vocabulary and things like that that I needed help with and understanding some of the things that they were asking. We have. And see, that's one of the main things we haven't been around in the public eye because I didn't want to expose my family to it if all these things were going on. You know, there was comments about Gannon getting pushed off the hike, and there was comments about this, and that's just not true. I took care of Gannon for the last 2 years in our home because his mother didn't want to do it. And I would never, ever hurt this child.
And I would never, ever hurt this child.
And I know there's some questions out there about, okay, so tell me what happens. That's up to the investigations when they end up letting you guys know, but I've cooperated with them, even to the point that we were held with a gun, and my daughter, a 17-year-old who serves our country in the United States Air Force, who has never committed a crime or done anything wrong in her life, was put in handcuffs over the keys that was in her purse so they could take her car. They weren't even in her car, I mean in her purse. They were in my pocket. I didn't know as a law enforcement officer because when he came out, I guess he was putting his jacket on, and it wasn't necessarily his fault. He was adjusting and happened to catch me. But I saw the gun and I panicked originally and kind of thought, oh gosh, I got the, like, who's this guy? And then once I realized it was the sheriff's office, I was totally okay, but they still had a gun and told me they were going to shoot me. But I was really concerned about my daughter, asking why she was being detained in handcuffs and things like that, when that shouldn't even happen for a child. That shouldn't happen for someone who was standing inside of a store shopping because we couldn't have any clothes because all of our clothes were here. If we came here and got clothes, you know, we would be harassed. So she went to purchase some underwear and things like that and was put in the handcuffs in the store, you know, and then brought out with men with guns. And that's just not okay. You know, they could have approached me and said, hi, I'm with El Paso County, can I please get this, instead of the way that it happened. Oh yes, wow, the rumors have gotten so bad. I pretty much have been told at least 10 different ways that these people have these conspiracy theories. I guess they watch a lot of law shows and maybe they have all these theories on how Gannon is dead, and that's what they're saying. So I'm like, why are you saying Gannon is dead? He is not dead. We are going to find Gannon. And that's the main goal that we all have, my family has. Just because you haven't seen us, we have that same goal. And we've been out searching. My aunt has been out searching. My family has been out searching. We all have been doing that together so that we could protect each other. You know, I'm just ready for Gannon to come home. Most importantly, for him to see his family. But second, I am going to be so ecstatic when I'm able to say to people that I hope they have a really sincere apology for all these theories that have came out online, for all the things they said that I have done or people have done. And I just want everyone to know that we're going to find Gannon. And I love him so much. I've helped taking care of him for so long. Gannon is so kind, and he loves to play video games. That's one of his favorite things. He loves Sonic and Mario, and you know, he's always helpful, and he was always so helpful with the dogs around the house, and we have 2 little cute dogs, and he was always like a person I could say, Gannon, can you go do this? And he would do it right away. You know, sometimes with kids we have to remind them and things like that, and that's okay, but he was so sweet and able to help anyone. He could notice when you're sick and say, are you okay? And such a kind heart. You know what? Could we bring my daughter up here? Because she can go and say that, you know, she came home from work after the hike, and she can verify that Gannon was at our...
Yes, so I came home later that evening. I was at work, and I can verify that he was there that night. Yes.
Where'd you guys go hiking?
Garden of the Gods.
Garden of the Gods, okay. I guess when...
And then we ate Burger King afterwards, so, you know.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then it was just, I'm off to go to a friend's house.
Unfortunately, I'm not able to like comment on that anymore, and for that reason is because some things have been turned and twisted, and you know, that was one of those stories you were talking about where people say things. We had to hear things like who would let their child go out at dark and things like that, and that's just why I don't want to answer that. If I had to give, I'm not gonna say that part.
That's okay.
Never mind.
Right.
I could take that out.
I understand that it gets tricky with
Yeah.
legal stuff.
I hope, am I on camera now?
You are
okay,
still.
Okay. I think that a lot of people can see that I'm not missing and see that I am being cooperative, but to me, it's okay that they think those things, because the way someone thinks about me, I don't have a problem with that. My main thing is I would never want someone to think that I would hurt Gannon or any of the children in our home, because that's just not the case. I've spent my whole entire life working so hard in education. There was even things online that was talking about my education license and I shouldn't even be a teacher, and they just didn't know that. Like, we moved on a military move, and I didn't finish out my contract, so I gave up my license in that state. It had nothing to do with any criminal activity, you know, or any of those things, and it just got blown out of proportion on my professional status, you know, and it definitely is. And you know, here's the thing that kind of saddens me. It's like, if you're going to talk about someone like that and have a witch hunt out for them, why would you even care, like, about doing those things? Because this is a child. You're telling me that you're just as mean, you're just as hateful to talk about someone else like that. That's how I feel. Like, we just should not. We should all come together and wait until the end and see what happens, because Gannon's going to come home. The message for Gannon I have is, Gannon, when you get here, you'll be able to truly tell what happened. And then I really hope I get a sincere apology from everyone who has made all those things, especially from my husband. We just wanted to add a message to Gannon from my family, is that we love you and miss you, and we hope that you come home soon. And Gannon, I can't wait till you can come home and let everyone know that you're okay. We love you.
So on March 3rd, DA Michael Allen filed a people's motion for a protective order because he said defendant throughout the investigation and subsequent to her arrest is considered like a flight risk because she's attempted to repeatedly escape from custody. Remember in South Carolina, had a physical struggle with the deputy, and then she has tried to solicit people in and out of jail. in order to escape. So they want to redact identifying information and contact information from the discovery files, because she can't be trusted, obviously. They want to provide unredacted discovery to her in jail. So I did receive lots of comments from you guys regarding the fact that Ted Bundy represented himself. You know, he was in law school and he was intelligent compared to her. So I don't know, but he did seem to grandstand a lot, make a mockery out of the whole thing at times. And people are wondering if she's going to have the ability to question Gannon's parents. I really hope not. But this video is about his crimes, what he did, and how he fared when he represented himself in court. So let's take a watch and listen. Bye. So Ted Bundy represented himself at trial. He was also in law school. At one point in the trial, he was a half an hour late, and the judge was really pissed. And he found him in contempt of court. He threatened to find him in contempt of court again. But Bundy did stuff toilet paper into his lock, and it delayed the court from starting on time. So a lot of women in the stands in the courtroom dressed and did their hair and makeup in the manner in which he preferred his victims, which is fucking bizarre. This is Carol Boone. He called her to the stand and asked her to marry him during the trial, and she accepted. And they called each other Bubbles. They did end up having a child, Rose Bundy. So he has been described as a psychopath. Letecia Stauch is also a psychopath. Bundy is said to have had a charming personality, and it's been said that Stauch has the personality of a rattlesnake. It's been said he has keen intellect. It's been said she doesn't even know what the word keen means. It's been said Bundy did not value human life, and it has been said Stauch values life her own. Bundy was a narcissist, and so is she. In the end, Bundy fried in the electric chair after all his appeals and everything. So, do you think Letecia Stauch will pull a Ted Bundy? This is Carol Durant. She was 18 in 1974. She was at a shopping mall in Utah and was approached by Ted Bundy. He posed as a police officer and told her car had been almost stolen. She needed to go file a complaint. So she got into his VW with him to head to the police department. And eventually he pulled over and he tried to handcuff her. But he screwed up and he put both cuffs on one of her wrists, and she managed to escape even though he was threatening her with a gun. She flagged down an old couple that pulled over, and then they brought her to the police station, and she reported the incident and described Bundy and his car to police. On August 16th, 1975, a state trooper spotted the VW parked in front of a house where two young women lived. He turned on his high beams and Bundy took off. And after a brief chase, he was pulled over, and the policeman found handcuffs, a ski mask, and other items in his car. He was arrested and charged with evading an officer, possession of burglary tools. Carol DeRanch ID'd him out of a police lineup. He was arrested and charged with attempted criminal assault and aggravated kidnapping. And in 1976, he was found guilty and sentenced to 1 to 15 years in Utah State Prison. He started to plan an escape. So he requested to represent himself at trial, was granted use of the law library. They ruled he didn't need to wear leg shackles or handcuffs. And he was allowed to walk freely to the law library into the courtroom. So he seized the opportunity and jumped 2 stories out of the law library window, fled to the mountains where he broke into a cabin, stayed for a few days. Search parties were everywhere looking for Bundy.
Bundy jumped out of this second-story window at the front of the Pitkin County Courthouse this morning. He was scheduled for a court appearance and apparently had been locked into the law library by sheriff's deputies while attorneys were arguing a motion to strike the death penalty. Witnesses say he left in a hurry, however, nobody saw him open the window, and he escaped clean in an unknown direction. At both ends of town, the sheriff's department put up roadblocks and searched each vehicle leaving the town of Aspen. As of late this afternoon, Bundy was still missing, but a court clerk said they'd arrested 9 people on warrants and confiscated 200 pounds of marijuana. All day long, County Sheriff Dick Keenest has been circling over the wooded hills in a helicopter looking for the suspected rapist killer, but with no success. Ted Bundy, a Washington State resident, was convicted last year of the kidnap assault of a young woman from Salt Lake City. He's also the prime suspect in a series of murders of young women in Washington State, as well as the suspect in a murder case here in Aspen. This is Ward Lucas reporting from Aspen.
They couldn't find him. He decided to walk back to town, stole a car, and a sheriff spotted the car that was weaving, pulled him over, and he was arrested 6 days after he escaped. In January of 1975, registered nurse Karen Campbell was with her fiancé, and they took a trip to Aspen, Colorado. And on January 12, 1975, she was relaxing in the lobby and went back to her room to get a magazine that she forgot. And then she just vanished. 36 days later, she was found by a recreational worker in a snowbank a couple miles away from the lodge. She had been brutally assaulted, and there was evidence of blunt force trauma. Ted Bundy had already committed at least 9 murders in Washington and Oregon, and Colorado authorities believed he was responsible for Karen Campbell's murder. So October 22nd, 1976, they charged him with murdering Karen, and he was extradited. So after he was caught, Bundy was transferred to Garfield County Jail in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. On December 30th, 1977, he escaped from Garfield County Jail, too. Bundy's former defense attorney recalled that Bundy had lost a tremendous amount of weight. I would think this would have come to the attention of the jailers, perhaps. Why is he doing this? Apparently his ceiling grate was never welded before Bundy was put in his cell, and he noticed that it wasn't welded. And so he lost this weight in preparation to escape from jail. He arranged some books and pillows on his bunk to make it look like he was in there sleeping. Brown told 2020 he crawled through the ducting just like in a movie. So Bundy crawled up in there, and he managed to get into a jailer's apartment who wasn't there. He put on the guy's clothes, and he just walked out. And then, unbelievably, after he left the jail, he managed to take a flight to Chicago, and then he took a train to Michigan, and he drove to Atlanta, Georgia. He got on a bus to Tallahassee, Florida. And he was on the run for over a month before he was recaptured, during which time he was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. And during this time, he murdered 2 more women, injured 2 other women, and killed a young 12-year-old girl. So on February 15th, 1978, Pensacola cops spotted an orange VW at about 1:30 in the morning. He ran the plates and it was stolen. So he got into a minor scuffle with Bundy. But Bundy was arrested and just refused to give the police any information about himself at all for about 2 days. Finally, he gave them a phony name and a stolen ID. On February 17th, he eventually told authorities who he really was.
I do.
Please state your full name for the record.
Theodore Robert Bundy.
Directing your attention to the early morning of August 15th, 1975, after you'd been stopped by Trooper Hayward, approximately what time of the
Can we
morning?
establish that was really the 16th, or did we? That date?
Judge, there's a discrepancy in the report.
Well, it's either the 15th or the 16th. Is there any question about that?
It's not.
All right. As long as we're not hung with one on one day and one on another, that's the only thing the court was worried about. We're talking about one single incident, either August the 15th or August the 16th. Is that correct, gentlemen?
That's correct.
All right. Proceed on.
About what time?
It was early in the morning, approximately 2 o'clock.
After you had been stopped, did Officer Hayward say anything to you?
Well, after the stop had occurred, I exited my car, and the officer, Hayward, had left his car and approached me, and the first thing he said to me was, "Why didn't you get out of your car and run? I could have taken your head off," or words to those effect. Words to that effect.
Did he ask you for your driver's license and registration?
He did. I think he asked me a number of questions which intervened the request for a driver's license, and I think he asked me after his first comment what I was doing in his neighborhood, to which I did not initially make a response. And then he asked me for my driver's license, which I got from the inside of my car.
Did you produce a driver's license?
Yes.
Did you produce a registration?
Yes.
Did Officer Hayward advise you of your rights at that time?
No.
Could you relate to me the circumstances which took place immediately after you were stopped?
After I gave the officer my driver's license, he went back to his vehicle, as I recall, and leaned in and pulled out the microphone that they use for the radios and came back to me and told me to go stand by his car, which was approximately 10 feet in back of my car. He told me to wait there, and there was an officer, another state patrolman, who was already on the scene, and he told me to stay with the officer. He told the officer to keep an eye on me.
Let me back up a little bit. Was Officer Hayward in uniform?
Yes, he was.
Was he carrying a weapon?
Yes, he was.
Was the additional officer who come to the scene, was he in uniform?
Yes.
Was he carrying a weapon?
Yes.
How many officers arrived at the scene?
Well, they arrived and they left. I'd say that at any one time there were, at the most that were on the scene at any one time, approximately a half a dozen.
Were they all in uniform?
All except for Detective Ondrak, who arrived later, who was in plain clothes.
What was the attitude of the officers towards you?
Well, I testified as to Sergeant Hayward's initial reaction after he told me to stand by his car. He proceeded to my car and he began to walk around it, shining his flashlight through the windows and peering in through the windows. The officer that I was standing with next to the patrol car began asking me questions, asking me what I was doing in the neighborhood, why I was there, so on and so forth.
Did any of the officers read you any rights, advised you the right to remain silent at that time?
No.
Did anybody advise you of the right to have an attorney present if any questions take place?
No.
Anybody advise you that you had the right not to talk to us?
No.
All right, and then Officer Hayward was looking in the car with a flashlight?
Yes.
And then what happened next?
He walked, as I was standing by the car, watching him and listening to the officer next to me ask me questions. I watched him walk around the car and shine his flashlight in the car. He apparently was focusing on something inside the car for some time, or it seemed like some time. He opened the car door, entered the car, and I couldn't see what he was doing. He came back to me and then repeated his earlier questions about what I was doing in his neighborhood, why I was there, and then as I recall, he went to make another call on his police radio.
Did Officer Hayward or any other officer at the scene ask you for permission to search the car?
No.
Did you give anyone permission to search the car?
No.
Had you ever been arrested?
No.
Did anyone tell you that you had a right to refuse to let them search your car?
No.
Do you remember the words being asked to you whether or not you minded if they looked inside your car?
I can't recall a request to search my car, and the words, whether or not they asked me if they could look in my car, is something I don't recall or construed as a request to search my car.
Do you remember telling any of the officers that they could look in your car?
No.
At any point during this incident, did anyone read you your Miranda rights or tell you your rights?
Yes.
At what point was that?
After Sergeant Hayward had searched my car and called in another officer to come in, and after my car had been thoroughly searched by the other officers, Detective Andract approached me at that time and informed me that he was going to seize certain items from my car, and told me that he was going to attempt to get a warrant or a complaint or something of that type against me for possession of burglary tools. At that point, Sergeant Hayward or another officer, I'm not sure, searched me for the first time, handcuffed me, put me in his vehicle, read me the rights off a little card he carried on his console, and drove me downtown to the Salt Lake County Jail.
It was after the search had taken place?
Yes.
And after the items had been seized?
Yes.
These are some of Ted Bundy's victims. Linda Ann Healy, 21. Donna Gail Manson, she was only 19 years old. Susan Rancourt was only 18, and she was a student at Washington State College. Roberta Parks, 20. She was abducted from Oregon State University. Brenda Carol Ball was abducted from a town south of Seattle. She was just 22. Georgianne Hawkins, 18. She's been missing since June of 1974. She's never been found, but he confessed to her murder. Denise Naisland, 18, disappeared from a state park on the same day. Janice Ott, 23, also disappeared from the same state park. Nancy Wilcox, 16, went missing in Utah. Melissa Smith, 17, daughter of a police chief in Salt Lake City. Laura Aim, 17, disappeared on Halloween night in Utah. Carol Durant survived. She's the one who ID'd him out of the lineup. She testified at his trial. Deborah Kent, 17. He confessed to murdering her. Karen Campbell, 23, is the one that disappeared from her hotel in Aspen. Julie Cunningham, 26, offered to help him when he was on crutches. Denise Oliverson, 24, disappeared in Colorado. Melanie Cooley, 18, disappeared on her way home from high school. Lynette Culver was only 12 years old, and she was kidnapped from her neighborhood in Pocatello, Idaho. Susan Curtis was only 15, abducted while walking back to her room during a Mormon youth conference. Margaret Bowman, 21, was attacked and killed at Florida University. Lisa Levy, 20, also at the same university. Kathy Kleiner, 20, survived. Karen Chandler, 22, also survived the attacks on the nursing students in Florida. Cheryl Thomas, 21, also escaped. And Kimberly Leach, 12 years old, in Florida. So people have wondered why Ted Bundy did the things that he did. I don't think anybody will ever really know. I did read stories about him when he was little. He was about 3 years old, and his aunt was taking a nap. And he had placed 3 kitchen knives on her bed. And when she woke up, little 3-year-old Ted Bundy was just standing there smiling at her. So that's pretty telling. Where he was heading, just bizarre. It just seems like once he started killing people, he just couldn't stop himself, and he was really ghoulish and depraved. His doctor did go and talk to him the day before he was executed. Let's see what Ted Bundy had to say.
How did this moment come about?
That's the question of the hour. People much more intelligent than I have been working on for years, but one that I've been working on for years and trying to understand. Is there enough time to explain it all? I don't know. I think I understand it, though. Understand what happened to me, to the extent that I can see how certain feelings and ideas developed in me to the point where I began to act out on them. Certain very violent and very destructive feelings. Again, and I want people to understand this too, and I'm not saying this gratuitously because it's important that people understand this, that basically I was a normal person. I wasn't some guy hanging out at bars or a bum, or I wasn't a pervert in the sense that, you know, people look at somebody and say, I know there's something wrong with him, and just tell. I mean, I was essentially a normal person. I had good friends. I led a normal life. except for this one small but very potent and very destructive segment of it that I kept very secret and very close to myself and didn't let anybody know about it. And part of the shock and horror from my dear friends and family years ago when I was first arrested was that there was no clue. They looked at me and they looked at the all-American boy. And I mean, I wasn't perfect, but I want to be quite candid with you. I was okay. Okay, I was. The basic humanity and basic spirit that God gave me was intact, but it unfortunately became overwhelmed at times. And I think people need to recognize that it's not some kind of those of us who have been so much influenced by violence in the media, in particular pornographic violence, are not some kinds of inherent monsters. We are your sons and we are your husbands.
The way you did it.
Listen, I'm no social scientist and I haven't done a survey. I mean, I don't pretend that I know what John Q. Citizen thinks about this.
One of the most important as you come down to perhaps your final hours, are you thinking about all those victims out there and their families?
Well,
who are so wounded, you know, years later, their lives have not returned to normal. They will never return to normal.
Again, I know that people will accuse me of being self-serving, but we're beyond that now. Yes, absolutely. In the past few days, myself and a number of investigators have been talking about unsolved cases, murders that I was involved in. And it's hard to talk about all these years later because it revives in me all those terrible feelings and those thoughts that I have steadfastly and diligently dealt with, and I think successfully, with the love of God. And yet it's reopened that, and I felt the pain and I felt the horror again of all that. And I can only hope that those who I have harmed, those who I've caused so much grief, even if they don't believe my expression of sorrow and remorse, will believe what I'm saying now, that there is loose in their towns and their communities people like me today whose dangerous impulses are being fueled day in and day out by violence in the media in its various forms, particularly sexualized violence. Well, by desensitization, I describe it in specific terms is that each time I'd harm someone, each time I'd kill someone, there'd be an enormous amount, especially at first, enormous amount of horror, guilt, remorse afterwards. But then that impulse to do it again would come back even stronger. Well-focused, very sharply focused area where it was like a black hole. It was like a, like a crack, and everything that fell into that crack just disappeared. I would like to be able to convey. I can't begin to understand. Well, I can try, but I'm aware that I can't begin to understand the pain. That's a very good question, and I'll answer very, very honestly. I don't want to die. I'm not going to kid you. I'll kid you not. I deserve certainly the most extreme punishment society has, and I think society deserves to be protected from me and from others like me. That's for sure. I think what I hope will come of our discussion is I think society deserves to be protected from itself. What people want with me, going beyond retribution and punishment, because there is no way in the world that killing me is going to restore those beautiful children to their parents and correct and soothe the pain. But I'll tell you, there are lots of other kids playing in streets around this country today who are going to be dead tomorrow and the next day and the next day and next month, because other young people are reading the kinds of things and seeing the kinds of things that are available in the media today. I can't say that
It's going to be
being
easy.
in the valley of the shadow of death is something that I've become all that accustomed to, and that I'm strong and nothing's bothering me. Listen, it's no fun. It gets kind of lonely, and yet I have to remind myself that every one of us will go through this someday, in one way or another, and countless millions who have walked this earth before us have. So this is just an experience which we all share, and
Yeah.
here I am.
All he said is, "I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." That was Ted Bundy's last statement.
So it ended for Ted Bundy. 10 years, 28 confessions, millions in Florida's legal battle to end his life.
That's it for me, everybody. Talk to you later. Bye.